Hello, followers. This story belongs to the shared universe of the Professor Egghead stories. Link to both where to begin and a compilation of the series will be linked in the description, as well as pinned in the comments section. Thank you for listening, as always, and let's delve into the dark together. 5 years ago, my twin brother moved overseas to see the world. Him being on a different continent than me didn't make it easy to stay in touch, and after about a year of regular Skype calls, we drifted apart. To try and keep tabs on the guy, I followed a neighborhood Facebook group from the city where he ended up living. I had to use Google Translate to figure out what the posts were about, but it was a nice way of getting to guess how his days were going. It's the heavy rainfall season. Hope Simon has an umbrella. Wow, it looks like a fun festival. Hope Simon can check it out. Australian national arrested. Kidnapping, missing person, torture. That's how I found out my brother had been arrested. Through a Google translated post nestled in between someone selling a bathtub and a missing dog plea. We're nearly identical twins, yet the picture that accompanied the announcement looked nothing like me. Simon had gained an unearthly amount of weight, and seems to have grown considerably taller. His face looked sickly and sleepless, and his neck had disappeared under rolls of discomfortingly pale skin. His arms and legs retracted back into the massive body and looked like stunned baby limbs. The giant wearing cuffs and a baby blue prison uniform looked like a distant nightmarish echo of Simon, but the name read clear. It was him. After a couple phone calls with the embassy, I got complete confirmation. My twin brother was accused of doing some terrible things far away from home. Someone needed to go be with him, so I went. I won't go into detail of his crimes. They are obscene, and I don't want to ever have to go over them again. To put it shortly, he did it. Before I got to see him, I had some doubts. I couldn't imagine Simon hurting anyone. I couldn't imagine my brother being fundamentally broken. Yet the moment I visited the prison, I knew. I knew that my brother was gone and replaced by a horrid, necklace giant. I got a copy of the key from Simon's landlord, but I slept in a hostel for the first few nights. The studio apartment that my brother had been living in stank of rot and grease and was filled with hundreds of thick college textbooks. What little space wasn't occupied by tomes of biology and quantum physics were covered in plastic wrappers and what looked like crushed-up eggshells. Finding some place to donate the textbooks and scrubbing out all the grime out of the apartment was exhausting, but it kept me from thinking too much about my brother. The first night that I slept in his old apartment, however, the thoughts became unavoidable. I couldn't help but wonder what it was like for Simon to live in those horrid, cramped conditions. I wondered whether I could have helped him somehow. Out here, foreigners pay their rent in yearly installments. With an additional fee, Simon's old landlord said I could live in the apartment for the next couple of weeks. I stayed in town. The mystery of my brother's transformation kept me around. For weeks, I crawled through every expat-friendly bar trying to find someone who knew Simon. No one knew him, but they all talked about him. The trial was on every television I passed. From the cryptic Google translated articles I found out, he got life in prison. No leads presented themselves. Simon's old landlord started asking for additional fees. I figured it was time for me to go home. In the middle of researching flights, however, the internet cut out. Minor internet outage isn't something rare for the city Simon moved out to, so I decided to take a bit of a break from the computer. Instead of finding something to eat or going bar diving in the extant streets, I sat down on Simon's couch and messed around with his television. Couldn't understand any of the local channels, and my phone started to ding with notifications again, but just as I was getting ready to go back to the computer, I noticed Simon's DVD player. Judging by the state of the apartment, the DVD player was something that hadn't moved from under the television for a couple of decades, but out of curiosity, on the off chance that Simon got sentimental for old tech, I opened it. Professor Egghead's Healthy Transformation Diet. A store-bought blank DVD with the title written on it in green Sharpie. just like the kinds the bootleggers on the street sold. Seized with a sudden curiosity with what Simon could have watched before he turned into a deadly-eyed monster, I pushed the DVD back into the machine and pressed play. An old gym flickered onto the screen. The windows were covered in dust. The workout machines screamed in horrid, rust-filled agony, yet the clientele of the gym were dressed in bright neon spandex. They were all furiously working out. There was no music. Everyone looked uncomfortable. The scene crawled on for long enough to where I almost turned off the television, but suddenly, from beneath the pained grinding of the workout equipment, I could hear a growing wave of applause. The show had a studio audience, and the audience was getting hyped. This excitement did not cross over to the actors. They were aware of the applause. The moment the clapping started, they all went completely still. The discomfort of the actors blossomed into fear. The weightlifters pulled on the equipment as if they were trying to rip it apart. The people doing yoga stretched their bodies into discomforting shapes. With each moment that the applause grew, their pantomime of exercise gained in terrified fury. Finally, the door of the gym flew open.
You are all fools of the highest degree.
The egg-shaped abomination screamed as he wobbled into the room.
The muscles that you were trying to rip apart and rebuild are useless. You are wasting both your time and mine. Stop exercising this instant.
He had the face of a man, but that is where any human connection ceased. The rest of the creature's body was shaped like an egg. Small, baby-like limbs stemmed from the egg, and a filthy lab coat with suspenders masked the Eggman's nakedness. The audience screamed in joy as if a beloved figure had appeared. The egghead showed no care for their praise. He simply continued marching towards the clientele of the gym.
Hey, bro.
Stuttered one of the weightlifters.
There's no judgment in this gym. This is a peaceful place.
Immediately, the muscle-bound man averted his eyes from the monstrosity.
I am not your brother.
The creature screamed to joyous laughter from the audience.
I am Professor Egghead, the leading expert on science, the apex predator of the world's laboratory.
The gym shook with another standing ovation. The egghead drank in the applause. He smacked his lips as if he was being fed a treat. But the moment he raised his arms, the audience went quiet.
These days, all you simpletons get all your information from a man who talks about chimpanzees.
The egghead screamed at the terrified clientele of the gym.
You are all ignorant. You have all gone dumb from a lack of peer review, academia in your lives. It all ends now. All your useless stretching and pulling of weights ends now. I will eradicate you in the true form of exercise.
Please, Mr. Egghead,
said one of the spandex-clad women stretching on the moldy foam mats.
can we just do our yoga in peace?
Mister? Did you just call me a mister?
The egghead punctuated his words with furious, dull stomps. A yellowing foam started to gather at the edge of his sickly lips.
Mr. Egghead was my father. I did not spend 17 years cleaning sweat from the walls of universities all across the globe to be addressed as a commoner. I am a professor. I shall be addressed as such.
The woman's lips moved, but no words came out. She looked like she was trying to apologize, but the egg-shaped nightmare was blind to her remorse. With one swift motion, he ripped the yoga mat from beneath her body. After a discomforting spin in the air, she landed on the hard floor of the gym. With his stubby fingers moving much faster than they should, Professor Egghead rolled up the yoga mat into a foam club and started beating the woman on the floor.
Flexibility will not save you from the boot heel of history. When society crumbles, your yoga will be useless.
After a couple impotent hits from his foam club, Professor Egghead moved over to one of the weightlifters. The mat was soft, but its blows landed with high-pitched slaps. Even though the weightlifter was thrice the size of the egghead, he cowered in fear at the oddly shaped scientist's blows.
No amount of muscle tissue on your once all comes to roost. No legs are fast enough to outrun the death march of progress. Your core will be utterly worthless when faced with the inevitable assimilation that awaits humanity. No, you need to only exercise one muscle.
The egghead pressed the foam mat against the bodybuilder's sweaty forehead. He tapped it with a gentle, almost erotic touch of the yoga mat.
The brain is the body's smartest muscle. It's the only thing in the universe that is capable of observing itself and rationalizing its surroundings. You must work on it every night and day. You must make it as muscular as the laws of physics will allow.
The audience went wild for the egghead's monologue, but the professor did not acknowledge them this time. He kept his exhausted eyes locked on the weightlifter. The foam that had gathered at the edge of the professor's lips was now dripping down in thick, yolky chunks. The nightmare was silent, but he was more than ready to jump into another diatribe. How do I exercise my brain, Professor Egghead? The bodybuilder wheezed. Like a dog that's being scratched behind the ears, Professor Egghead's eyes closed at the mention of his own name.
I am happy you asked.
He sang.
Knowing how to exercise your most important muscle is more important than hygiene or drinking water combined. Simply think of your favorite equation and close your eyes.
Everyone in the gym immediately shut their eyes. The professor inspected each of the gym's clientele before looking directly at the audience. I shifted on the couch. I knew it was just a trick of the camera, but I was certain that the nightmarish creature on the screen was aware of my existence.
You are home, audience. It is time for you to close your eyes and think of your favorite equation as well. It can be any equation you desire. As long as it is scientific, it is good for you. My favorite vintage is the Lagrangian. Lagrangian equations 1/2 mv squared minus mgz. M is mass, v is velocity, and z is height. Do you have your equation ready, audience? Good. Now exercise that muscle.
With his eyes closed, the egghead looked strangely peaceful, like a terminally ill baby that had fallen asleep for the final time. For a solid 2 minutes, the gym was completely silent. All that could be heard was the dripping of spittle from the egghead's filthy mouth.
I hope no one at home cheated. All those who tried to swindle the egghead will be remembered during the final experiment.
The egghead screamed, ripping me from my thoughts.
Now that you know how to exercise your mind, this gym should be ripped apart and transformed into a library. Forget the weights and forget the yoga mats. All you need to remember are the equations paired with a healthy diet. This exercise will allow you to prepare for the horrid path down which humanity walks.
The studio audience roared with applause, and the egghead once again indulged in their attention. As if each clap was a jolt of electricity that gave him strength, Professor Egghead started dancing in the center of the room. The gym clientele backed away from the exercise equipment. The little nightmare had convinced them.
Professor Egghead,
The lady, which had been thrown to the floor, asked.
what does a healthy diet consist of?
Like an ill-shaped ballerina, the egghead turned around on his heels and faced the woman. With a grin of sharp, needle-like teeth, the professor slurped in all the sickly mucus around his lips.
Happy you asked.
The professor said, grinning a sharp, crooked smile.
Professor Egghead is very happy you asked this specific question.
The scene cut. What I saw next will forever be seared into my brain. A naked, filthy man crawled through a demented world. The land beneath his feet at first seemed like a hill of pale white pebbles, but as the desperate man crawled up the mountain, he took handfuls of the rocks and chewed them in his grizzled mouth. Every bite he took sent greenish clumps of yolk dripping down his chin. Out beyond him, an infinite desert of eggs lay. Each dune he passed led to an even bigger one. Each step he took echoed with the crackling of life, yet the eggs beneath his feet were plentiful.
A truly healthy diet only consists of one thing.
The nightmarish professor screamed, standing gargantuan on the horizon, blocking out the sky.
Egg is the only thing that you must eat. Egg is the only thing that will make you strong. Egg is life. Egg is love. Egg is science.
Like a wild animal that had been starved in a cage, the man ate the eggs. His beard was filled with eggshell and yolk, yet he showed no signs of slowing down. He scarfed down the eggs like a wild animal. He looked scarcely like a man, yet his face seemed familiar. Simon.
You must eat the egg. You must eat the egg and keep your brain strong. You must eat the egg because soon I will call upon you to act in my stead. Soon you shall hear my voice and you will help me preserve humanity. You must eat the egg so that...
I turned off the television. My heart was deep in my throat and I felt nauseous. Even though the screen had turned black, the image remained. My flesh and blood, my brother, my twin, Simon, crawling through the sea of eggs, grizzled and mad. It was far too much for me. I got off the couch and paced around trying to catch my breath. I splashed water on my face from the kitchen sink and then drank some of it. Then I went to the fridge, opened it up, and grabbed an egg out of the carton. The movement was purely mechanical. There was no thought behind it. All I knew is that an egg would make me feel better. My hands came to a shivering stop inches away from my mouth. The rational side of me knew that biting down on that egg was a wholly insane thing to do. But somewhere inside of me a falsetto screamed otherwise. My resistance towards the maddening pull of the egg did not last long. The eggshell stuck to my tongue, and its yolky contents made me heave, but I swallowed every last bit of the egg. I crushed up the egg in my mouth and swallowed it, and then I reached for another one, and another, and another. When the carton in the fridge was empty, I forced myself to the couch. I forced myself to breathe and wait and rationalize, but again, that falsetto voice wouldn't let me. It dragged me from the couch to the door and then out to the street. I returned with eggs. A lot of eggs. Life has been hell since the moment I touched that DVD player. Against my own better judgment, I have rewatched the Professor Egghead DVD repeatedly. I kept on telling myself that I was looking for some detail in the footage, some hints to how I could rid myself of this curse, but I knew that in truth I was looking for something much simpler. I was looking for something to watch while I ate. Somewhere on the other side of the country, my twin brother sits in a cramped jail cell, awaiting a makeshift knife from someone who heard about his crimes. Last time I saw Simon, he looked nothing like me. But now, when I look into the mirror, I see we have become similar once more. I cannot stop. The falsetto screams deep in my heart won't let me. Even as I write this, my mouth is filled with eggshell and raw yolk. I cannot resist the voice, and its demands are growing more numerous. It doesn't just want me to eat eggs anymore. No, it wants me to go out and do the bidding of the professor. It wants me to go out and act in the name of science. I cannot resist the voice, and I fear that soon enough I will see Simon again.